The sun was rising slowly over the mountains surrounding Pine Valley, Colorado, painting the sky with orange hues that blended with the deep blue of the early morning. Emily Walker woke to the singing of birds, a natural symphony that had always accompanied her mornings. At 25, she maintained the same routine since she could remember, rising early, helping Grandma Martha in the small medicinal herb shop, and contemplating the exuberant nature of the mountains she loved so much. That morning, however, something seemed different. The air was denser, filled with expectation, as if nature itself was holding its breath, awaiting something imminent. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine when she opened the window of her simple but cozy room. "Good morning, my dear." Martha's voice came from the kitchen, mixed with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and fresh herbs. "Good morning?" "Grandma," replied Emily, observing her grandmother with her back turned, preparing breakfast with precise and familiar movements. Martha was a woman of few words, but her silence was eloquent. At 70, she carried in her gaze the wisdom of the ancients, those who understood the secrets of earth and sky. Her hands, marked by time, were capable of transforming simple herbs into powerful remedies that cured everything from common colds to ailments that doctors from the big city couldn't comprehend. "Did you sleep well?" asked the grandmother, turning to face her with those penetrating brown eyes that always seemed to know more than they revealed. "Yes, but—" Emily hesitated, uncertain whether she should share the uneasiness she felt. "I had strange dreams. A huge buffalo was looking at me as if it wanted to tell me something." Martha's fingers trembled slightly as she served the coffee, a subtle detail that didn't escape her granddaughter. The old woman sat at the rustic wooden table and sighed deeply. "Some dreams, my child, are more than dreams. They are messages." "Messages from whom, Grandma?" Martha merely smiled enigmatically and changed the subject, talking about the herbs that needed to be harvested that day. Emily knew that smile well. It was the same one her grandmother gave whenever questions came too close to the mysteries. She guarded. After breakfast, Emily went out to the yard where the old mango tree extended its branches like protective arms over the moist earth. She had always felt a special connection with that century-old tree, as if she could hear its whispers on nights with strong winds. That's when she noticed it, a strange gleam between the roots of the mango tree, almost imperceptible, but that seemed to be calling her. Intrigued, she approached and knelt on the ground. She felt her heart accelerate, as if something within her was awakening. With her hands, she began to move the moist earth, digging delicately. "What are you doing?" The voice of Mr. Joseph, the neighbor who had always treated Emily like a granddaughter, sounded from across the fence. He was observing her with an expression that mixed curiosity and apprehension. "Oh, Mr. Joseph, I'm just planting some seeds for Grandma." The old man frowned, not seeming convinced. "Be careful with what you awaken, girl. Not all that glitters is gold." Before Emily could question the meaning of those enigmatic words, Mr. Joseph had already moved away, limping slightly with his carved wooden cane. Intrigued but determined, she returned to her excavation. That's when her fingers touched something cold and metallic. Carefully, she removed the buried object, a silver medallion covered with ancient symbols that seemed to move under her attentive gaze. As she held it, she felt a wave of heat course through her body, as if an electric current was flowing from the medallion into her skin, awakening something dormant inside her. "Emily!" Martha's voice cut through the air like thunder, making the young woman stand up with a start. Her grandmother was standing at the back door with an expression that Emily had never seen on her face before. Pure panic. "Put that away. Now." "Grandma, what is this? Not here." Martha looked nervously around as if she feared the trees themselves might be listening. "Come inside. Now." Emily obeyed, confused and frightened by her grandmother's reaction. She put the medallion in the pocket of her simple cotton dress and followed Martha inside the house. The old woman closed all the windows and doors, murmuring words that Emily couldn't understand. "What's happening, Grandma? Why are you acting like this?" Martha approached, holding her granddaughter's hands in hers, her eyes, normally calm like the waters of clear river, now seemed stormy. "There are things in this town that the walls of houses keep, Emily, and some of those things have been waiting for you." The silence in the small wooden house was so dense that Emily could hear her own accelerated heartbeat. Martha walked from one side to the other, the floorboards creaking under her restless steps. The tension was palpable. "Grandma, please explain to me what's happening," asked Emily, the medallion now weighing in her pocket as if it were made of lead. Martha stopped in front of the old cedar china cabinet, a family heirloom that had crossed generations. With trembling hands, she opened a small drawer hidden in the base of the furniture and took out a wooden box carved with the same symbols as the medallion. "I knew this day would come," murmured the old woman, more to herself than to her granddaughter. "I just didn't expect it to be so soon." Emily watched her grandmother carefully open the box. Inside was an old leather-bound diary tied with a faded red ribbon. "Our family is not like the others in Pine Valley, my child," began Martha, sitting at the table with the diary in her hands. "We carry a responsibility that dates back to times that history books don't record." The young woman approached, sitting across from her grandmother, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "What responsibility?" "Guardians," answered Martha, her eyes fixed on her granddaughters. "Our lineage has always been of guardians, protectors of the balance between the natural world and the human." Emily felt a chill. The stories her grandmother told during her childhood about ancient protectors of the forest and nature spirits had always seemed like mere fables to entertain a dreamy child. Now, she realized that perhaps there was more truth in them than she had ever imagined. "The medallion you found belonged to your mother," continued Martha, her voice a little firmer now, "and before her to my mother, and so for generations passed from mother to daughter, from guardian to guardian." "My mother?" Emily felt her heart tighten. She had almost no memories of Catherine, who had disappeared when she was only 5 years old. Martha rarely spoke about the subject, saying only that her daughter had gone on a journey and never returned. "Yes, your mother," confirmed Martha, opening the diary. "Catherine was special, like you. She could feel the energy of the earth, talk to the spirits of nature. The medallion amplified her gifts, allowing her to fulfill her role as a guardian." Emily took the medallion from her pocket, observing it. With new eyes, the symbols seemed to dance under the light that entered through the cracks in the window. But what happened to her? Why did she never come back? Martha's face hardened, marked by an old pain that had never fully healed. "There are forces in this world that oppose the balance we protect, Emily. People who wish to use the power of nature for their own ends. Your mother faced one of these individuals and paid the price." The house phone rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. Martha startled, looking at the old device as if it were an intruder. "Don't answer it," she said, taking the medallion from her granddaughter's hands and quickly storing it along with the diary in the wooden box. The phone continued to ring insistently. After the 5th ring, it fell silent. "Grandma, I'm scared," confessed Emily, feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Martha held her hands firmly. "There is no reason for fear when you have courage, my child. And courage is something that runs in your blood." A strong wind lashed at the windows of the house, making the wood groan. Outside, the once clear sky was beginning to be covered with dark, dense clouds. "They already know," whispered Martha, quickly standing up. "The medallion was activated when you touched it. Its energy awakened, and now they will come." "Who, Grandma? Who will come?" Before Martha could answer, loud knocks sounded at the front door. Emily felt the blood freeze in her veins. "Mrs. Thompson," a masculine voice, deep and authoritative, called from the other side of the door. "We need to talk." The old woman exchanged a significant look with her granddaughter. "It's August, the mayor," she murmured. "Pretend you don't know anything, understand? No matter what he says, you don't know anything about the medallion or about the guardians." Emily nodded, although 1,000 questions were boiling in her mind. Martha took a deep breath, adjusted the shawl on her shoulders, and walked to the door, opening it with a calmness that contrasted with her inner agitation. August Harrison was a tall and imposing man with well-trimmed grey hair and penetrating blue eyes. Impeccably dressed in a suit despite the heat, he entered the house with the familiarity of someone who had been there many times. "Martha," he greeted with a nod of his head, before turning to Emily with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And, young Emily, how you've grown since the last time we met." "Mr. Mayor," Emily forced a smile, uncomfortable under the man's evaluative gaze. "To what do we owe the honor?" asked Martha, calculated gestures hiding her anxiety. August walked around the room, observing every detail as if looking for something specific. "There was a disturbance in the town's energy today," he finally said, stopping in front of the china cabinet, where the box with the medallion was hidden. Something awakened, something ancient. Emily felt her stomach tighten, but maintained a neutral expression as her grandmother had instructed. "I don't know what you're talking about, August," replied Martha firmly. "If you came here because of some superstition, don't treat me like a fool, Martha," he cut in, his voice icy. "We both know what your family guards. The council is concerned. If the medallion has awakened, it means it's time, and we're not ready." "The council?" Emily couldn't contain the question, immediately regretting it when she saw her grandmother's warning look. A calculating smile curved the mayor's lips. "So she doesn't know," he concluded, addressing Martha. "You haven't told her about her legacy, about the Council of Guardians, about what will happen when the balance is broken." Martha stepped forward, placing herself between the man and her granddaughter. "You have no right to interfere in my way of preparing the next guardian, August. This is a family matter. It's a matter for the entire town, the entire world," he exclaimed, momentarily losing his composure. "Time is running out, Martha. Richard's forces are growing, and now that the medallion has awakened—" The mention of Richard's name made Martha visibly pale. Emily, observing her grandmother's reaction, felt a knot form in her throat. Who was this man capable of provoking so much fear in a woman who was usually so unshakable? "Richard is back?" asked Martha, her trembling voice betraying her dread. Mayor August adjusted his tie as if he needed time to choose the right words. "He was seen near Ridgewood 3 days ago. According to our informants, he's gathering allies, and now with the awakening of the medallion—" He left the sentence hanging, the silence more eloquent than any words. Emily looked from one to the other, trying to decipher the mystery that was unfolding before her. The tension in the air was almost palpable, electrifying the environment like the calm that precedes a storm. "Grandma, who is Richard?" she finally asked, unable to contain the curiosity that consumed her. Martha and August exchanged significant looks, as if they were waging a silent battle over how much to reveal. "Richard Walker," began the mayor, ignoring Martha's warning, was one of the most brilliant members of the Council of Guardians, until ambition corrupted him." "Enough, August," interrupted Martha, her eyes flashing. "She's not ready for all this yet." "And when will she be?" he retorted, exasperated. "When Richard is already at our doors, when the balance is already irremediably compromised?" Emily stood up, feeling a sudden courage inflate her chest. "I'm right here, you know. Stop talking about me as if I couldn't hear or understand. If there's something I should know, if there's something I should do, then tell me, once and for all." Thunder rumbled in the distance, as if nature itself was responding to her demand. The lights of the house flickered, momentarily plunging them into semi-darkness. "See?" said August, pointing to the window where the curtains trembled with the intensifying wind. "She's already connected. The power runs in her veins whether you want to admit it or not, Martha." Martha sighed deeply, suddenly looking older and more tired. "You're right," she finally admitted. "We can't wait any longer." Turning to Emily, the grandmother held her hands firmly. "Richard is your mother's brother, Emily, your uncle, a man who was once as connected to nature as our family, but who chose to use his gifts to control rather than protect. He was responsible for your mother's disappearance." The revelation hit Emily like a punch. She had always known there was mystery surrounding her mother's disappearance, but she had never imagined something so terrible. "My uncle," she repeated, incredulous. How is that possible?" Why did you never tell me about him?" "To protect you," answered Martha, her eyes watery. "Richard believes that the power of the Guardians should be used to dominate nature, not to live in harmony with it. He spent years seeking a way to amplify his corrupted gifts, and now he wants the medallion," completed August. "With it, Richard will be able to completely unbalance the natural forces, subjugating them to his will." Emily felt her head spin with so many revelations. It was as if a veil was being ripped from her life, revealing a world completely different from the one she had always known. "And what do I have to do with this? Why did the medallion awaken for me?" Martha walked to the china cabinet, removing the carved wooden box. She opened it and handed the medallion to her granddaughter. "Because you are the next guardian, Emily, the most powerful in generations, if the signs are correct. This medallion belonged to your mother, and before her, to mine, and so on for generations. It is more than a symbol. It is an amplifier of the gifts that run in our blood." Emily held the medallion, feeling it pulse against her palm like a second heart. The symbols carved in the ancient silver seemed to dance, calling to her. "But what gifts are these? I've never done anything extraordinary." "You've always had a special connection with nature," explained Martha. "Remember how the plants in the garden grow more vigorously when you care for them? How animals approach you without fear? How you can predict rain before any cloud appears in the sky? These are your gifts manifesting subtly since your childhood." August, who had been observing the scene with impatience, intervened. "We don't have time for gradual introductions, Martha. The council needs Emily to assume her role now. Richard is already on the move." A new thunderclap, closer, shook the windows of the house. Outside, the sky was darkening rapidly, not with rain clouds, but with an unnatural darkness that made Emily shudder. "What's happening?" she asked, approaching the window to observe the phenomenon. "It's him," murmured Martha, fear evident in her voice. "Richard is manipulating the natural forces, trying to locate the medallion." As if confirming her words, a whirlwind of wind formed in the yard, tearing leaves from the trees and making the old mango tree groan under its force. "Emily," called August urgently, "you need to accept your role now. Put on the medallion. Let it recognize you as the legitimate guardian." Hesitantly, Emily looked at her grandmother, seeking confirmation. Martha nodded, encouraging her with a sad smile. "I always knew this day would come," she said. "I just wanted you to have more time to prepare, to fully understand what it means to be a guardian." "And what does it mean?" asked Emily, the medallion weighing in her hands. "It means honoring life in all its forms. It means maintaining balance, even when it's difficult. It means sometimes sacrificing your own desires for the greater good." Emily took a deep breath, looking alternately at the medallion in her hands and at the darkening sky outside. Throughout her life, she had felt that something was waiting for her, that her connection with nature had a greater purpose. Now, faced with the revelation of her destiny, she felt both fear and excitement. With a decisive movement, she placed the medallion around her neck. Instantly, she felt a wave of energy course through her body, as if every cell was awakening to a new consciousness. The world around her seemed to become sharper, more alive. She could feel the pulsation of the earth beneath her feet, the whisper of the trees outside, the distant call of birds seeking shelter from the imminent storm. "It is done," said August, a gleam of triumph in his eyes. "The new guardian has awakened." Martha approached, embracing her granddaughter tightly. "Remember, Emily, your power comes from love, not from fear, from connection, not from control." At that moment, the door of the house was violently opened, revealing a tall and imposing figure against the darkened sky. A middle-aged man, black hair with gray strands at the temples and penetrating green eyes that seemed to glow with their own light. "Too late, sister," he said, his deep voice reverberating like thunder. "The next guardian has already awakened, and I've come to claim what is rightfully mine." Emily faced the stranger, feeling a shiver of recognition. Even though she had never seen this man before, something in her blood responded to his presence. "Richard," she whispered, the name escaping her lips before she could even think. The smile that formed on Richard's lips was cold, calculating, but his eyes shone with an almost feverish intensity as they fixed on the medallion that now hung from Emily's neck. "My niece," he said, taking a step into the house, completely ignoring August and Martha. "Finally, we meet." Martha placed herself between Richard and her granddaughter, a fragile but determined barrier. "Get out of my house, Richard. You are not welcome here." The man laughed, a humorless sound that made Emily shudder. "After 20 years, is this how you receive your only brother, Martha? With hostility?" He shook his head in false disapproval. "And I thought that age would have softened your heart." "After what you did?" Martha's voice trembled with contained anger. "You took my daughter from me. You took Emily's mother." Richard sighed dramatically, as if he were bored with the accusation. "Catherine made her choice, sister. She chose to stand against me, against progress, against the true purpose of our gifts." Emily felt the medallion heat up against her skin, pulsing in sync, with the anger growing in her chest. "What did you do to my mother?" she asked, stepping forward, her hands trembling. Richard's green eyes, so similar to her own, studied her with clinical curiosity. "You have her spirit, the same stubborn determination," he observed, ignoring the question. "But I hope you have more wisdom, niece, that you can see beyond the limitations that your grandmother and the council impose on our gifts." August, who had remained silent until then, advanced with authority. "Richard Walker, by order of the Council of Guardians, you are banished from the lands of Pine Valley. Your presence here is a violation of the ancestral pact." Richard turned to the mayor, a disdainful smile curving his lips. "Ah, August, always the faithful watchdog of the council," he mocked. "But your empty decrees have no power over me. Not anymore." With a quick gesture of his hand, an invisible force struck August, throwing him against the wall. The mayor fell heavily, dazed by the impact. Emily gasped, shocked by the demonstration of power. Martha grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "See, Emily," said Richard, showing his hands like a magician after a trick. "This is the true potential of our gifts, not just communing with nature, but controlling it, molding it to our will." "That's not control, it's corruption," retorted Martha, her voice firm despite the fear. "You have distorted the essence of our gifts, Richard." "I liberated them," he exclaimed, exasperated. "For centuries our family has been content to be mere witnesses, passive guardians of a balance that limits human potential. I discovered how to transcend these limitations, how to use the power of nature to transform the world." Emily felt the medallion vibrate against her skin, as if responding to Richard's presence, to the threat he represented. Each word from him seemed to awaken something inside her, an instinctive understanding of what it truly meant to be a guardian. "Transform the world in your image?" she questioned, surprised by the firmness of her own voice. "That's not transcendence, it's tyranny." Richard's eyes gleamed dangerously, fixed on his niece. "You talk like your mother," he said, a note of genuine sadness in his voice. Catherine also couldn't see beyond the council's dogma, beyond the narrowness of Martha's vision. He took another step forward, extending his hand to Emily in an almost pleading gesture. "Come with me, niece. Let me show you what your gifts can really do, liberated from the chains of the council. Together, we can realize the true potential of our lineage." A sudden wind burst through the open door, agitating the curtains and scattering papers around the room. It wasn't a natural wind. Emily could feel the corrupted energy in it, the distortion of nature's forces under Richard's command. "No," she answered firmly, holding the medallion like a shield. "I don't know exactly what it means to be a guardian yet, but I know it's not what you offer." Richard's expression hardened, all pretense of family affection disappearing. "Then you've already been poisoned against me. A pity." He raised his hand, and suddenly Emily felt as if the air in her lungs had solidified. She couldn't breathe. She fell to her knees, gasping for oxygen. "Richard, stop!" shouted Martha, throwing herself against her brother. With a casual movement, he repelled her, throwing her aside as if she weighed no more than a leaf. "It's just a demonstration, sister," he explained calmly, as Emily suffocated, so that my niece understands the consequences of her choice. August, recovering from the impact, lunged at Richard, but was again repelled by an invisible barrier. The mayor fell, an expression of impotence on his face. Emily, struggling for air, felt the medallion burn intensely. A voice which seemed to come from within her, and at the same time from far away, whispered in her mind, "You are not alone. The power is in you, in your blood, in your connection with everything that lives." With an immense effort, she raised her hand, touching the medallion. A wave of pure energy exploded from her, a golden-green light that filled the entire room. Richard was thrown backward, his control over the air around Emily instantly broken. She breathed deeply, feeling the oxygen fill her lungs. She stood up, trembling but determined, the medallion shining intensely against her chest. Richard, regaining his balance, looked at her with a mixture of surprise and respect. "Impressive," he murmured. "You have more power than I imagined. More even than Catherine had at your age. What did you do to my mother?" Emily demanded again, her voice carrying an authority she didn't know she possessed. A shadow crossed Richard's face. "Catherine preferred to sacrifice herself rather than join me," he answered, after a moment of hesitation. "A foolish decision, but courageous in its own way." Tears burned in Emily's eyes, but she held them back. She wouldn't give Richard the satisfaction of seeing her break. "She stopped you," Emily concluded. "That's why you disappeared for so long. She prevented you from getting what you wanted." Richard smiled coldly. "Temporarily, yes. Your mother delayed me, but she didn't stop me. And now the cycle completes itself." He looked significantly at the medallion. "The power that was denied to me has returned through you, and this time I will take it." Martha dragged herself to her granddaughter, pulling her back. "You'll have to go through me first, brother," she declared, determined despite her injuries. "And me?" added August, positioning himself beside Martha. Richard observed the three with an air of cruel amusement. "You really think you can stop me? I'm no longer the young idealist you expelled 20 years ago. I've studied, learned, mastered aspects of our gifts that you don't even dream exist." As if to prove his point, he raised his hands. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the walls of the small house began to crack. Outside, the storm intensified, lightning cutting through the darkened sky. Emily felt his power, the corruption of nature that he commanded. But she also felt something else, the resistance of the earth itself, of the air, the water, the life around. Nature didn't submit voluntarily. He distorted it, forced it against its essence. "This power is not yours by right," she said, her voice low but firm. "You take it, you force it, that's not how it works." Richard narrowed his eyes, irritated by the continued resistance. "And what do you know about how it works, child? You have barely awakened your gifts." "I know enough," replied Emily, feeling a certainty grow inside her. "I know that nature is not a tool to be used, but a partner to be respected." The tension in the small room was palpable. Richard looked at his niece with a mixture of irritation and curiosity, as if he couldn't decide whether she was an obstacle or an opportunity. Outside, the storm he had summoned continued to roar, shaking the windows of the house. "Your naivety is touching, Emily," he said, circling the room like a predator. "Your grandmother has filled your head with the same nonsense she tried to instill in your mother. Respect for nature? Partnership?" He let out a disdainful laugh. "Nature is raw. Power. Elemental force waiting to be dominated by those with the knowledge and ability to do so." "You're wrong," replied Emily, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. The medallion on her chest seemed to pulse, feeding her with an understanding that went beyond mere words. Nature is not just raw force. It has consciousness, purpose. Lightning illuminated the room through the windows, highlighting Richard's expression. For a moment, Emily glimpsed something in his eyes. Not anger or disdain, but a deep melancholy, so quickly covered that she almost doubted having seen it. "I think I've heard enough," he declared, extending his hand toward her. "You will come. With me, Emily. If not by choice, then by necessity." Before he could act, the back door burst open with a crash. A young woman entered, soaked by the rain, her dark eyes shining with determination. Not another step, Richard, the newcomer commanded, positioning herself between him and Emily. Richard seemed genuinely surprised for the first time. Laura? He took a step back, his expression faltering. What are you doing here? Emily looked confusedly at the stranger. She appeared to be about 30, with wet black hair framing a face with strong, determined features. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar. You know him? Asked Emily, without taking her eyes off Richard. Unfortunately, yes, replied Laura, her voice firm. He was my mentor before I discovered his true intentions. Traitor, hissed Richard, the mask of composure slipping to reveal a primitive anger. After everything I taught you, you taught me to distort nature, to corrupt it for my own ends, Laura cut in, and I believed you until I saw the price of that. Martha approached Laura, lightly touching her arm. You came, she said with evident relief. As soon as I felt the disturbance in the balance, confirmed Laura. The others are on their way. Richard looked from Laura to Martha, understanding dawning on his face. You recruited her, he accused, my own apprentice. Laura found the path on her own, replied Martha. Unlike you, she knew how to recognize when she was going down the wrong path. Emily, still holding the medallion, felt power flowing between everyone in the room. It was like an invisible web of energy, connecting them in ways she was only beginning to understand. Who are you? She asked Laura. The woman gave her a quick glance, a half smile on her lips. Someone who was also deceived by Richard, but more importantly, I am a guardian, like you, part of the new council formed after your uncle has caused so many problems. A movement at the door caught everyone's attention. Mr. Joseph, the old neighbor that Emily had always known, entered limping, his carved wooden cane now seeming much more than a simple support. The cycle completes itself, he declared, with a voice much firmer and more resonant than Emily had ever heard. Catherine's daughter has awakened. Richard frowned, looking with contempt at the old man. You too, Joseph, the great master of the Guardians, reduced to a lame old man hiding in an irrelevant little town? Mr. Joseph smiled serenely, immune to the provocations. Hiding in plain. Sight has always been the best strategy, my boy. You should have learned that during your training. Emily looked at her neighbor with new eyes. The man she had always seen as a friendly gentleman, who occasionally offered her candy and told stories, now revealed himself as a figure of power and authority. You're part of this too? She asked, still trying to absorb so many revelations. Mr. Joseph approached her, leaning on his cane. I am the current master of the Council of Guardians, Emily. I have been watching you since you were a little girl, seeing your gifts blossom, waiting for the right moment. The right moment for what? She asked, feeling that they were approaching the core of the whole mystery. For you to take your place in the council, he replied, casting a significant look at Richard, to correct the imbalance that your uncle caused 20 years ago. Richard laughed, a bitter and cold sound. Always so melodramatic, Joseph. I didn't cause any imbalance, I simply showed that there is another path, one that your precious council was too afraid to explore. Laura stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Richard. You almost destroyed Spirit Valley with your experiments, she accused. You corrupted the river, poisoned the land. That's not another path, it's devastation. New lightning illuminated the room, and this time, Emily clearly saw the conflict on Richard's face. There was something more behind his bitterness, something he hid even from himself. Necessary sacrifices, he replied, but without the previous conviction. To reach the true potential of our gifts, we need to go beyond the limits imposed by tradition. Mr. Joseph struck his cane on the floor, and Emily felt a wave of energy emanate from him, stabilizing the house that was shaking under the force of the storm outside. Enough, Richard, he ordered. You've already caused enough destruction. Go back the way you came, or we will be forced to stop you. Richard looked around, assessing the situation. Now he faced not just Emily and Martha, but also Laura, August, and Mr. Joseph. The balance of power had changed. You really think you can stop me? He challenged, but there was a touch of uncertainty in his voice. Together, yes, replied Laura, and we are not alone. As if to confirm her words, Voices began to be heard from outside. Residents of Pine Valley were gathering around the house, called by a force that seemed to transcend common communication. Emily felt the medallion heat up against her skin again, but this time it wasn't a defensive reaction. It was as if it were trying to tell her something, to reveal some hidden truth. "You don't understand, do you?" she suddenly said to Richard, following her instinct. "It's not just about power or control, it's about balance, about harmony." "Empty words," he retorted, but without conviction. "Then why are you here?" she pressed. "Why come back after so many years? If your path is so correct, why do you need the medallion?" A shadow crossed Richard's face. "Because," he hesitated, as if he were struggling with himself, "because something is wrong. The power I obtained is turning against me." That unexpected admission caught everyone by surprise. Mr. Joseph exchanged a significant look with Martha. "What?" insisted Emily, feeling they were reaching a crucial truth. Richard passed his hand over his face, suddenly looking exhausted. "Nature resists me more and more. The more I try to control it, the more it fights, the more it weakens me. I need the medallion to restore the balance." "The one you manipulated for decades?" asked Mr. Joseph, his voice now gentle, almost compassionate. "Nature is not a tool without its own will, Richard. It responds, resists, adapts." Emily felt a sudden understanding, as if the medallion were opening her mind to a deeper truth. "You're getting sick," she said, not as a question, but a statement. "The corruption you spread is coming back to you." Richard didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. "There is a way to correct this," offered Laura, surprising everyone. "It's not too late for you, Richard, for none of us." "What are you talking about?" he asked, distrust evident, but also a spark of hope. "The purification ritual," replied Mr. Joseph, "in Spirit Valley, where it all began." Richard took a step back, shaking his head. "Impossible. The valley is dead, corrupted. I saw it myself." "Not completely," corrected Laura. "Life is returning, slowly. With Emily's help and the medallion, we can accelerate the process, and perhaps heal you too." The storm ceased as abruptly as it had begun, leaving an expectant silence in the air. Richard looked at Laura, Mr. Joseph, and the others, distrust fighting against hope in his eyes. "A trap," he murmured, though his voice lacked the previous conviction. "You want to lure me to the valley to destroy me." "If we wanted to destroy you, Richard, we would have tried right here," replied Mr. Joseph, his voice tired but firm. "You are weakened. We can feel that. The nature you tried to subjugate is taking its toll." Emily observed her uncle, noticing for the first time signs that she had ignored. The paleness under the tanned tone of his skin, the tension in his movements, the feverish gleam in his eyes. He was sick, deeply sick, in a way that went beyond conventional medicine. "Grandma, is this true?" she asked, turning to Martha. "Can we help him and the valley, as is that where my mother disappeared?" The old woman hesitated, looking at her brother with a complex mixture of emotions. Anger, hurt, but also, surprisingly, compassion. "Yes, Spirit Valley is where everything happened 20 years ago," she finally confirmed. "And yes, there is a purification ritual, but Richard must be truly repentant, truly willing to restore the balance he broke." All eyes turned to Richard, who seemed to be waging an internal battle. For a long moment he remained silent, his green eyes, so similar to Emily's, fixed on a distant point. "I didn't intend for it to be like this," he finally said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "In the beginning, I just wanted more. More knowledge, more power, more freedom to use our gifts. The council was so limited, so stuck in traditions." "And Catherine," asked Martha, her voice trembling, "did you also not intend what happened to her?" Richard closed his eyes as if the question were a physical pain. Catherine was right. "I was blinded by ambition. When she tried to stop me," he shook his head, unable to continue. Emily stepped forward, the medallion warm against her skin. "My mother sacrificed herself to prevent you from completely destroying the valley," she stated, the words coming from a place beyond conscious knowledge, as if the medallion itself were revealing the truth. She channeled all her life energy to create a seal, a shield that prevented your corruption from spreading beyond the valley. Richard nodded slowly, confirming her words. And now that seal is weakening, completed Laura. The corruption is spreading again. That's why the signs appeared, why the medallion awakened for Emily. That's why you came back, added Mr. Joseph. You felt it too. Nature is fighting against corruption, and you are at the epicenter of that conflict. Richard rubbed his chest, as if trying to alleviate a deep pain. Each day it gets harder, he admitted. My body, my mind. The corruption I spread is consuming me from the inside out. Then you accept our help, asked Emily, surprising herself with the offer. This man was responsible for her mother's disappearance, for years of secrets and pain. And yet, looking at him now, she saw more than a villain. She saw a man broken by his own wrong choices. Richard looked at her, really seeing her for the first time. You are exactly like her, he murmured. The same foolish compassion, the same stubborn strength. It's not foolish to offer a chance at redemption, replied Emily, holding the medallion, even to those who don't deserve it. A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Richard nodded, an almost imperceptible gesture of surrender. I accept. Take me to the valley. The decision triggered frenzied activity. While Mr. Joseph gathered the other council members who had arrived in town, Martha and Laura prepared Emily for the journey. The medallion needed to be protected, they explained, as it would be the key to the purification ritual. Spirit Valley is deep within the Rocky Mountains, explained Laura as she helped Emily pack a small backpack with supplies. It's been a sacred place for the Guardians for centuries, a point where the Earth's energy is especially powerful. That's where it all began, added Martha, handing her granddaughter a small bundle of herbs. And that's where it must end. Emily stored the herbs in the backpack, a burning question on her lips. Grandma, is there any chance, any possibility that my mother is still alive? Martha's silence was answer enough, but the old woman placed her hands on her granddaughter's shoulders, looking her in the eyes. Catherine gave her life to protect the valley, to protect all of us, she said softly. But part of her lives in you, Emily, in your gifts, in your spirit, and now you have the chance to complete what she began. Before dawn, a small group gathered in the central square of Pine Valley. Emily, Martha, Laura, Mr. Joseph, August, and 3 other guardians who had arrived during the night. Richard was with them, visibly weakened but determined. The journey won't be easy, warned Mr. Joseph, leaning on his cane as he observed the group. The valley is corrupted, hostile. We'll need all our strength and unity to cross it and reach the center, where the ritual must be performed. Emily felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Just a day ago, her biggest concern was helping her grandmother in the herb shop. Now she was about to lead a group of guardians on a mission to save not just her town, but possibly much more. You're not ready, Richard suddenly said, observing her with critical eyes. The medallion has awakened for you, but your gifts are still raw, unrefined. You barely know what you're capable of doing. Then teach me, replied Emily, surprising everyone, including herself. During the journey, show me how to use my gifts correctly. Richard raised his eyebrows, clearly not expecting that response. You would trust me to teach you, after everything? I've done. I don't trust you, clarified Emily, but I trust the knowledge you have, and I'll need it if we want to succeed. Laura intervened, placing herself between them. I'll teach her too, to ensure that Richard doesn't omit certain parts of the truth. The sun was beginning to rise on the horizon when the group departed, following ancient trails that wound through the rocky formations of the Colorado Mountains. Emily walked at the front with Laura and Richard, while the others followed close behind. Martha had stayed in town, her health not allowing the arduous journey, but her spirit seemed to accompany them with every step. The medallion is more than a symbol or an amplifier, explained Richard as they walked, his voice weaker than the day before, but still carrying authority. It's a focus, a connection point between you and the essence of the earth. Not just the earth, corrected Laura, of all life. The medallion connects the guardian to the currents of energy that flow Through everything that lives. Emily touched the medallion, feeling it respond to her touch, warm and vibrant against her skin. And how do I use this connection? Concentrate, instructed Richard. Close your eyes and feel the world around you, not just with your physical senses, but with what's beyond them. Reluctant but determined, Emily obeyed. At first, she felt nothing beyond the warmth of the sun, the gentle breeze in the trees, the sounds of the forest. But then, gradually, a new awareness began to open within her. It was as if she could feel the sap running in the trees, the water, winding beneath the earth, the vital energy of every creature around. "It's working," she whispered, amazed. "I can feel out everything." "Good," approved Richard. "Now extend beyond the immediate. Reach farther, toward the valley." Emily deepened her concentration, extending her consciousness as he suggested. Suddenly she gasped, opening her eyes in shock. At a distance they couldn't yet see with their physical eyes, she had felt a dark stain, a painful absence where there should have been life. "The valley," she murmured, feeling nausea at the sensation. "It's like a void, a wound in the earth." Richard nodded, his face somber. "That's what I did. What my ambition caused." For the first time, Emily saw genuine remorse in his eyes. It wasn't just the physical pain that was corroding him, but the weight of his actions, the belated understanding of the harm he had caused. As they advanced, the landscape gradually changed. The lush vegetation of the mountains became sparser, the trees more twisted and dry. The air grew heavier, laden with a metallic odor that scraped the throat. By nightfall, they reached a point where they could see Spirit Valley in the distance. A depression in the earth where, even from a distance, it was possible to see that something was deeply wrong. The vegetation was grey and withered, and no animal sounds could be heard. "We'll camp here tonight," decided Mr. Joseph. Entering the valley in darkness would be too dangerous. While the others set up camp, Emily stayed alone on a rocky formation, observing the blackened valley in the distance. The medallion seemed heavier against her chest, as if recognizing the proximity of the place where her mother had made the ultimate sacrifice. "I miss you, Mum," she whispered to the wind. "Even without having really known you." She was extraordinary. Richard's voice came from behind her, surprising her. He approached with slow steps, evidently tired from the journey. "Why did you do it?" asked Emily, turning to face him. "Why hurt your own sister?" Richard sat heavily on a nearby rock, the effort of the walk clearly taking its toll. "I didn't intend to hurt Catherine," he answered after a long moment. She was everything to me. We grew up together, trained together. But while she embraced the council's teachings, I questioned them. I saw limitations where she saw wisdom." Dawn arrived with a pale light, filtered by a strange mist that hovered over Spirit Valley. The group gathered in silence, tense faces reflecting the apprehension they all felt. Emily adjusted the medallion on her neck, feeling it pulse like their second heart. "Once we enter the valley, stay together," instructed Mr. Joseph, his voice carrying the authority of decades as Master of the Guardians. "The corruption affects not just the land, but also the mind. You will feel fear, doubt, perhaps even anger. Resist." Emily observed Richard, who seemed even more worn down this morning. His skin had a greyish tone, and small dark veins were visible on his neck, rising toward his face, the corruption manifesting physically. "Are you well enough to continue?" she asked, surprising herself with her own concern. Richard nodded briefly, his eyes fixed on the valley. "I have no choice," he replied. "This is my last chance." The group began the descent along the steep trail that led to the valley. As they approached, the air became denser, with a metallic and sickly odor. The vegetation grew sparser, giving way to twisted and blackened trees, as if they had been carbonized, although there were no signs of fire. Emily felt the medallion heat up against her skin, responding to the proximity of the valley. Her consciousness expanded, capturing the pain of the wounded earth. It was like hearing a continuous and silent lament, a chorus of voices without sound that reverberated in her chest. "The ritual will need to be performed in the center of the valley," explained Laura, walking beside Emily. In the exact location where Catherine made her sacrifice, where the barrier was created. How will we know where it is? Asked Emily, avoiding a twisted branch that seemed almost to move in her direction. The medallion will guide us, replied Laura. It's connected to the energy of your mother's sacrifice. Richard, who was walking a few steps ahead, suddenly stumbled, falling to his knees. The dark veins on his neck pulsed visibly, and he let out a groan of pain. The corruption is responding to the proximity of the valley, explained Mr. Joseph, helping him stand. It's strengthening, feeling at home. Emily ran to the other side of Richard, supporting him by the arm. Resist, she murmured. We're almost there. The look Richard gave her contained a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Why are you helping me? He asked. After everything I did? Because it's what my mother would have done, she replied simply. As they advanced into the interior of the valley, the landscape became increasingly disturbing. The ground was covered with blackened, creeping vegetation, which seemed to pulse, slightly as if it were alive in an unnatural way. The sky above them seemed darker, although it was almost noon. Do you feel that? Asked August, looking nervously around, as if we were being watched. It's the corruption, explained Richard, his voice weakened but still carrying authority. It has a kind of consciousness, a primitive intelligence. It knows we're here. An unnatural and icy wind swept through the group, bringing incomprehensible whispers that seemed to surround their minds. Don't listen, warned Mr. Joseph. They're just echoes of corruption trying to confuse, demoralize. Emily, however, heard something different in the whispers, a familiar voice, even though she had never consciously heard it. Mom, she whispered, suddenly stopping. The medallion on her chest shone intensely, emitting a golden-green glow that cut through the gloom of the valley. The whispers retreated, as if repelled by the light. What was that? Asked Laura, looking admiringly. At the medallion. Catherine's spirit is still here somehow, replied Mr. Joseph, amazed, preserved in the very fabric of the sacrifice she made. Richard looked at the medallion with an indescribable expression, pain, remorse, hope, all mixed on his face, marked by corruption. She's trying to help us, he said, his voice choked, even after everything. They continued advancing, the glow of the medallion now serving as guide and protection. Emily noticed that the light repelled the corrupted vegetation, which retracted at its touch, like sensitive creatures fleeing from the sun. After what seemed like an eternity, the group reached a clearing in the center of the valley. The ground, there was different, a perfect circle of clean earth, without any sign of the corruption that infected the rest of the valley. In the center of the circle, there was a small elevation, like a natural altar formed by the earth itself. It's here, declared Mr. Joseph solemnly, the site of Catherine's sacrifice, the heart of the barrier. The medallion on Emily's chest was now shining intensely, almost blinding. She felt a presence enveloping her, welcoming and familiar, although she had no conscious memories to associate it with. What should I do? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Mr. Joseph looked at Richard, who, despite his debilitated condition, seemed the most knowledgeable about the necessary ritual. The medallion must be placed on the altar, instructed Richard, pointing to the elevation in the center of the clearing. Emily, as the legitimate heir, must channel her energy through it, renewing the barrier that is weakening. And what about you? Asked Emily. How will this heal you? Richard averted his gaze, the truth weighing on his shoulders. Maybe it won't, he admitted. The corruption is deeply rooted in me, but if the barrier is renewed, at least it will prevent it from continuing to spread. And maybe with time... There's more, interrupted Laura, stepping forward. Something Richard isn't telling. All eyes turned to her as she faced Richard with determination. Tell her the whole truth, about the price of the ritual, about what really happened to Catherine. A heavy silence fell over the group. Richard seemed to be waging an internal battle until he finally sighed, defeated. The ritual requires a sacrifice, he revealed, looking directly at Emily. Not necessarily of life, as it was with your mother, but of power. Whoever performs it permanently loses their connection with the gifts. That means, Emily began, understanding slowly dawning. "It means you will never be a guardian again," completed Richard. "All the gifts you just discovered, all the potential you're just beginning to explore, everything will be lost." Emily felt the weight of that revelation. To lose something she had barely begun to understand, that she had only glimpsed. But then she thought of her mother, who had made a much greater sacrifice. "And if I don't do this?" she asked, needing to understand. "All the consequences." "The corruption will continue to spread," replied Mr. Joseph. "Slowly at first, then more rapidly. Eventually it will reach Pine Valley, then other towns, other ecosystems. Nature will continue to resist, but it will be at a disadvantage." The weight of the decision hung over Emily like a dense cloud. Lose her newly discovered gifts or allow the corruption to continue spreading, eventually threatening everything and everyone she loved. It wasn't really a choice. "I will perform the ritual," she declared, raising her chin with determination. Richard stepped forward, the dark veins on his neck visibly pulsing. "There is another option," he said, his voice weak but urgent. "I can make the sacrifice." A murmur of surprise ran through the group. Laura looked at Richard with evident distrust. "You?" she questioned. "The man who almost destroyed this valley for power is willing to sacrifice his own gifts?" "Precisely because of that," replied Richard, facing her without wavering. "I was the one who caused all this. The corruption came from me, from my mistakes, from my excessive ambition. It's only fair that I pay the price." Mr. Joseph studied him attentively, his cane firmly planted on the ground of the clearing. "Do you understand what you're proposing, Richard?" asked the old master. "Without your gifts, you will be just an ordinary man. Your entire life has been defined by your power, by your connection with nature, even if distorted." Richard nodded slowly, a resigned calm in his gaze. "I understand. Perfectly, and it's what I desire now. I've lived too long under the yoke of power." Emily observed her uncle, seeing in him, for the first time, echoes of the family she had never known. The same determined chin she saw in the mirror every morning, the same green eyes that, without the shadow of corruption, would be identical to hers. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, studying him cautiously. "How do I know this isn't just another of your tricks to obtain the medallion?" A sad smile curved Richard's lips. "You have no reason to trust me, Emily. I've done nothing to earn your trust, but look at me." He extended his arms, showing his body visibly corroded by corruption. "I am consumed by my own mistakes. If this continues, I won't last much longer. This isn't a plan to obtain more power, it's a last chance at redemption." An icy wind swept through the clearing, bringing with it incomprehensible whispers. The corruption around the clearing seemed to stir, as if sensing that something decisive was about to happen. "We don't have much time," warned Laura, looking nervously at the blackened vegetation that seemed to move with a life of its own. "The barrier is almost completely weakened. We need to perform the ritual now." Emily touched the medallion, feeling it vibrate intensely against her fingers. She looked at the elevation in the center of the clearing, then at Richard and finally at Mr. Joseph, seeking guidance. "What should I do?" she asked the master. Mr. Joseph rested both hands on top of his cane, his ancient eyes laden with wisdom and compassion. "The choice is yours, Emily. You are the legitimate heir of the medallion, Catherine's daughter. The decision about who will make the sacrifice must be yours." Emily closed her eyes, seeking guidance within. She felt a gentle presence enveloping her, like a long-awaited embrace. When she opened her eyes again, there was certainty in her gaze. "Richard will make the sacrifice," she declared. "He caused the rupture. He should be the one to close it." Her uncle nodded, accepting the decision with a dignity she hadn't expected. "Thank you, niece. You're giving me more than I deserve, a chance to correct my mistakes." Mr. Joseph instructed the group to form a circle around the natural altar. Emily positioned herself directly in front of Richard, with the altar between them. The other guardians completed the circle, creating a human barrier against the corruption that seemed to be approaching, attracted by the imminent ritual. "Emily, you must remove the medallion and place it on the altar," indicated Mr. Joseph. Then both of you must place your hands on it, channeling your energy. With trembling fingers, she removed the medallion from her neck, feeling a sudden vulnerability in doing so. Carefully, she placed it on the small elevation of earth in the center of the clearing. The medallion glowed intensely as it touched the ground, as if recognizing the place. Richard approached, positioning himself on the other side of the altar. He extended his hands, hovering them over the medallion without touching it yet. Emily did the same, her eyes meeting her uncle's. "When you touch the medallion," explained Mr. Joseph, "the ritual will begin. Richard, you must focus your intention to sacrifice your gifts, to renounce power. Emily, you must focus your acceptance of the medallion, your willingness to assume the role of guardian. Together you will renew the barrier and purify the valley." An electrical tension seemed to permeate the air as the two prepared. The corruption beyond the clearing was now violently agitating, as if sensing its own imminent destruction. "Are you ready?" asked Mr. Joseph. Both nodded, their eyes fixed on each other, uncle and niece, separated by decades of secrets and pain, united now by a common purpose. Now. Emily and Richard's hands simultaneously touched the medallion. An explosion of golden-green light emanated from the point of contact, so intense that everyone was forced to look away. Emily felt a wave of energy coursing through her body, deeply connecting her to the earth beneath her feet, to the air around her, to every living being in the valley. Richard, on the other hand, arched his back in silent agony, the dark veins in his body pulsing violently. The corruption was being extracted from him, torn from every cell of his being. His eyes, previously clouded by the disease, began to clear, returning to the intense green of the family. A pillar of light rose from the medallion, ascending toward the sky, piercing the unnatural darkness that hung over the valley. Where the light touched, the corruption retreated. The blackened vegetation trembled and dissolved, giving way to small green shoots that immediately sprang from the purified soil. Emily felt a familiar presence intensify around her, not just a sensation, but almost a physical manifestation. For a fleeting moment, she had the impression of seeing a woman with dark hair and green eyes like her own, smiling with pride and love. Catherine, her mother, present somehow in the power released by the ritual. The light expanded in concentric waves from the center of the clearing, sweeping across the entire valley. Each wave purified more of the corrupted terrain, restoring the balance broken decades ago. Emily could feel the joy of the earth being healed, the relief of nature freed from corruption. Richard fell to his knees, still maintaining contact with the medallion. His face was transformed, not just by the absence of corruption marks, but by an expression of deep peace that Emily had never imagined seeing on him. "It is done," he whispered, his voice weak but clear. "I can feel the emptiness where my gifts were. It's liberating." The pillar of light began to gradually diminish, condensing back into the medallion. When the last spark disappeared, a reverent silence fell over the group. The sky above them had cleared, allowing the afternoon sun to bathe the valley with natural and welcoming light. Emily looked around, marveling at the transformation. Where before there had been only desolation and corruption, now small green shoots were emerging from the soil. Birds, absent for decades, began to fly timidly over the restored valley. Life was returning. "The balance has been restored," declared Mr. Joseph, leaning on his cane with eyes moist with emotion. "The barrier has been remade, stronger than before." Emily picked up the medallion from the altar, feeling it lighter, more harmonious against her palm. When she placed it around her neck again, she experienced a sensation of complete belonging, as if finally finding her place in the world. Richard remained on his knees, exhausted but transformed. Laura approached him, extending her hand to help him up. After a moment of hesitation, he accepted. "What will happen to me now?" he asked, looking at the group. "Without my gifts, without power?" "You will have to learn to live as an ordinary man," replied Mr. Joseph. "Find value in yourself, not in the power you possessed." "And what about my crimes?" insisted Richard. The harm I caused. You paid a high price, intervened Emily, approaching her uncle. You sacrificed the essence of what you were. The council will decide your final fate, but I believe this sacrifice will be considered in your judgment. A solitary tear ran down Richard's face, perhaps the first sincere one in decades. Thank you, niece, he said simply. The return journey was completely different. Where before they had faced desolation and darkness, now they walked through a reborn valley with small green shoots emerging with each step. The air was clean and fresh, laden with the promise of renewal. Emily walked at the front, the medallion softly glowing against her chest. She felt the gifts flowing freely now, her connection with nature stronger than ever. She understood finally the legacy her mother had left her, the responsibility that was now hers. When they reached the top of the slope, looking down at Spirit Valley below, Emily stopped to contemplate the transformation. What was once a wound in the earth now pulsed with new life, like a page turned, a new chapter beginning. And now? She asked Mr. Joseph, who stood beside her, observing the valley with satisfaction. Now, your true journey begins, replied the old master. You are a complete guardian, Emily. You still have much to learn, but your place in the council is assured. Your mother would be proud. She touched the medallion, feeling the comforting warmth against her fingers. Somehow she knew that Catherine was present, that she always had been, guiding her even when she couldn't see or hear. Let's go home, she said, turning to the group that observed her with respect and admiration. As they moved away from the valley, Emily cast one last look behind. For a fleeting instant, she had the impression of seeing a female figure standing in the center of the valley, waving in farewell. She smiled, feeling a peace she had never experienced before. The balance had been restored, and with it a new beginning, for the valley, for Richard, and especially for her, Emily Walker, the guardian of Pine Valley, protector of the balance between the natural world and the human, continuing her family's legacy, carrying with her the strength and sacrifice of those who came before. The journey was just beginning,